Hello everyone. My name is Elise. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing so good today. We are here to kick off a new vlog. So welcome to the vlog. And this vlog, we are theming all around adaptations, or soon to be adaptations, I should say. So I'm going to be reading 3 novels that all have adaptations slated to come out in the future. I think most of them this year, but I'll tell you a little bit about the release date when I get to each book specifically later in the vlog. And really the thing that inspired me to do this is I, one, love a good book to movie or TV show adaptation. I think it's so fun to think through the casting, to see the differences and the similarities between the 2 projects. And secondly, I really needed a vlogging project that had some easier books for my brain, because the other vlog that I'm filming simultaneous to this is the Republic of Consciousness vlog, which is probably going to come out before this one. And those books are a little bit more like cerebral, heavy hitting, and I wanted something else to balance that, because like a lot of people, February, I think mentally for me is just like one of the hardest months of the year. We're in the latter half of winter and I just have a little bit less energy. So this felt like something to really keep me excited and engaged with reading in a more fun way for my brain than some of the more like challenging fun that the other vlog is bringing to my life, which I love both of them. I want both of those things in my reading life. So let's go ahead and get into the books that I'm going to be reading for this video. The first one I will be picking up from the library, and that is Margot's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. I'll put the publisher down below because I don't remember off the top of my head. This one I will be reading via audiobook, and part of the reason that I want to read it via audiobook is that it's read by Elle Fanning, who is going to play Margot in the adaptation. I'm an Elle Fanning stan. I love her, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her narrate an audiobook. So that will be the first book that I read. Next up, we're going to be reading The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This one's published by Scout Press, and this was gifted to me from my mother-in-law. Of course, if there's a thriller that's gifted to me, it's probably coming from my mother-in-law. And hilariously, my mother-in-law and I gifted this to each other before we were going on our first cruise together. So I had brought this for her, and she had also given a copy to me. So we kind of swapped. But I still haven't read this, and that was so many years ago. So I'm finally going to be getting to this. This has an adaptation in the works, plus it just came out with a sequel. So if I like this, then I can pick that up as well. So that's book number 2. And behind door number 3, we have another book that was gifted to me. This is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry, published by Berkeley. My friend Kat gave this book to me, and I just read my first Emily Henry last year and enjoyed it. So excited to get to her next one in publication order of her adult novels. So these are the 3 books that I'm going to be reading. I'll give more of a synopsis and a little bit of information about the upcoming adaptation at the time that I start reading each book. So for now, I just wanted to come on here and introduce the vlog, tell you which books I'm reading, and I will check back in with you once I've started the first book, which I know will be Margot's Got Money Troubles. So I will see you all then. Hello everyone. We are back, and I have an update for you. I accidentally read the entirety of Margot's Got Money Troubles, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an update about the synopsis and sort of what I thought of the beginning, and some information about the adaptation, and then I'll give you kind of a separate update with my review in a different location so you don't get bored. So let's first just talk about the blurb of the book. So Margot's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe is about Margot, who has had a relationship with her college professor. She's still pretty young. I think she's 19 at the beginning of the book. So obviously, ew, right? We know ew, but she ends up getting pregnant and she decides to have the baby, sort of despite everyone's advice to her. But she thinks having the baby is sort of like the right thing to do. And this sets off a course of chaotic events in her life. The other thing that you know from the blurb is that in order to make ends meet, she ends up starting an OnlyFans. And this is at the very beginning of OnlyFans, when a lot of people don't really know much about it. And there's still a lot of stigma around doing OnlyFans. There still is stigma, but there was even more when it first began. So that's the setup of the book. The narration style of this book is something that I absolutely adore. So it actually goes back and forth between first and third person. And Margot kind of describes to you why she is sometimes talking in first person and sometimes talking in third person. Sometimes she needs more emotional remove in order for her to retell the story to you. And sometimes she wants that kind of like really intimate storytelling style. So I thought that was lovely and wonderful. And the voice of Margot is one of the shining stars of this book. She is such a singular character to follow. She talks in a very matter-of-fact way, which is hilarious in a lot of points. I think Margot is just a character with so much heart. Her voice is so fun to follow. And the book is really intriguing. It's presenting a lot of different philosophical ideas that it wants the reader to grapple with, but it's doing it in a fun and engaging way. And that combination is just catnip for me. I love books that make you think and question your own values and beliefs and prejudices around things, but do it in a really engaging manner instead of a didactic manner. And this is exactly that. And so I was having the best time while I was reading this, kind of thinking about what I would do in different scenarios and how I would respond to some of the things that the characters are doing and saying. Fascinating. So I'll wait to give you my final review, although you can tell I was at least liking it somewhat. But let's talk a little bit about the adaptation for this. So in this vlog, I'm specifically picking books that are going to have adaptations that are coming like relatively soon, but are not out yet. This book I think is going to do so well as an adaptation, particularly because of the voiciness of the main character and because of the theatrical nature that comes with some of the plot points. So one of the main things that this book talks about is Margot's relationship with her father. Her father was a professional wrestling personality. And there's a lot of interesting comparisons from the wrestling industry to the OnlyFans industry, or even like sex work industry as a whole. And one of the similarities between the two is sort of like what it means to be a face, what it means to be a personality that's consumable for the public. And that is just going to play so well on screen. So yeah, this I think I'm very, very excited this is going to be an adaptation. The adaptation is going to come out on Apple TV. There isn't an exact release date for it yet, but it's expected to be released sometime in 2025. Elle Fanning, of course, is going to play the main character, but there are some other pretty big names coming out in this, like Nicole Kidman, for example, is going to be in this. We haven't gotten specific confirmation on who's going to play which character, but it's sort of speculated who's going to play what. But really interestingly, one of the other main characters in this book is Margot's father, and Margot's father is going to be played by Nick Offerman, which I think is such a good choice for that character. I think he's also going to crush it, and oh my god, I'm so excited. It is going to be an 8-episode mini-series, and unclear whether Apple is going to release them all at once or release them week by week, which tends to be how they come out with series. But yes, very excited. So hopefully those details about the adaptation get you intrigued as well. And now let's head over to slightly future release so I can talk about my review of the book. Okay, so I just talked a decent amount about Margot's Got Many Troubles, but I'm just going to add in some additional things that kind of came from the ending of the book for me. Not about the plot, but just how I felt about them. Obviously, I loved this book. Easy 5 stars. I absolutely loved it and adored it. So excited for the adaptation. To add on to some things that I didn't mention earlier is the character work outside of the main character was also really stunning in this book. I think all of the secondary characters were really richly drawn and complicated in their own right. They had their own backstories and kind of plots to go along with them. And I think it's really hard to do that in a book where we're probably getting 10 secondary characters, and for them to be that fully fleshed out is extremely impressive because this book is not very long. I think it's just under 300 pages, so it's fairly short, and it's masterful in the way that it allows you to quickly get a real glimpse of the character to make them feel real to you, but to avoid kind of falling into the pitfalls of making them feel stereotypical or just like a stand-in for the plot or anything like that. This book also talks a lot about addiction and the prejudice that gets put on people who have struggled with any type of substance abuse, and just how complicated and messy and hard it is to get clean. This book explores many, many themes, and honestly, it does them all so well. But I can't get into them because it would be a spoiler for some of the things that happen in the plot later down the road. But just know, like, this book is coming for so many different structures that we have in the United States particularly. It's coming for a lot of cultural beliefs that we hold. It's coming for our government agencies. Like, it is really trying to make you question the way that we live, all with this tone of like funny direct to reader dialogue. And it's just really unique. It's not like something that I've read for a long time, and I will continue to sing this book's praises. So I agree with everyone else that has really recommended it and loved it. Let me know if you have read Margot's Got Money Troubles and if you're looking forward to the adaptation. And I will check back in with you once I have started the next book. So I will see you then. Bye. Okay, so we are back, and I'm gonna give an introduction to our next book, which is The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware, which is done by Scout Press, which I believe is an imprint of Simon & Schuster. This is one of Ruth Ware's first publications. I think this came out in 2016, but let me double check. Yes, it came out in 2016. So I've had it for a long time. Let me give you a little bit of a premise about this, and then I'll talk about the adaptation a bit. So the premise of this is we're following a woman who is going on this luxury cruise, and the cruise liner is smaller. It's like 10 cabins, and this is sort of the trip of a lifetime for her, and it's supposedly going to be the making of her career because she is a travel journalist, and this is one of the first big assignments that she's been allowed to cover. While she's on the cruise, she ends up witnessing, or thinks she ends up witnessing, a murder, but she doesn't sort of have all the pieces. So in the cabin next door to her, in cabin 10, she thinks she hears a scream and then a splash in the water, and as she runs out to check out what happened, she thinks she might have seen someone go under the water. And there's also a blood smear on the privacy screen between her veranda and the one next door. So that's sort of the kind of inciting incident that sets off the mystery of this book. And this is a genre thriller, so I think we're in for that type of style of story. So that's a little bit of the premise. Now let me talk a little bit about the adaptation. So the adaptation is coming out on Netflix later this year in fall of 2025. And it has a fairly stacked cast. The lead role is going to be played by Keira Knightley, whom I love and adore and highly trust. It also has Guy Pearce, and it has Hannah Waddingham and many, many others, but those are some of the top billed cast. And this is going to be a standalone film. And there are a couple of stills that I'll kind of put up on the screen, but it looks very atmospheric, very moody. And I do think thrillers make really good adaptations. So as I'm reading the book, I'll kind of check in with you about whether or not I'm excited for this to be an adaptation, if I think it's going to be a good fit as an adaptation, and we'll kind of go from there. But that's the general information about the release that will be coming later in the year. So I'm going to go ahead and start getting into the book, and then I will give you an update once I've made it a little bit of the way through and can kind of give you a little bit more of a premise, and then I'll probably check in at the end with my review. So I will see you all then. It's time for the next update of The Woman in Cabin 10. So this book is told in 8 parts. Part 1 starts with our main character, Lo, getting burgled. So she's asleep, she hears a noise, and when she opens her bedroom door, there's a man in her flat. He is covered kind of from head to toe. He's wearing a mask and he's wearing gloves, so she can't make out any identifying features about him. And when she discovers him, he kind of like slams her bedroom door in her face, and she has a cut on her cheek.
So this is the inciting incident. And as you might remember from the blurb, it's kind of eerily similar to what happens on the boat later on, right? She hears what she thinks is a murder and she goes out to investigate, and she sees a smear of blood on the partition between her veranda and the next one. So that's just kind of like some foreshadowing I'm expecting at this point in time. But the other thing that this book starts out with, sort of this like journal entry. It's just this one page and it's all told in italics, and it's her, our main character, having a dream, and the dream is of someone drowning. So again, I think that's foreshadowing, pretty heavy-handed foreshadowing, I would say. But yeah, she gets burgled, and then you quickly find out that she's in a relationship, but her and her partner are kind of like quasi long distance. They both travel for work fairly frequently, particularly her partner. You get dropped into kind of what seems to be a reoccurring argument that they have, which is he wants Lo to move in with him and she is very hesitant to do that. The fight kind of escalates and she kind of breaks up with him. It's a little bizarre. So she breaks up with him as she's about to leave for this once in a lifetime trip on the cruise. So she leaves his flat, goes directly to the cruise, and that is the start of part 2 when she's about to get on the cruise. So I will say the first part is rough. It's a little bit rough. I have come to realize that for some genre fiction, particularly like true to its genre fiction, so thrillers and romance, the beginning of them I can find very contrived and cringy, and I'm definitely getting that in this book. I'm hoping that it will get better. It's still early days, but I am concerned at this point in time that this isn't going to be a huge hit for me, just because of the kind of like melodrama that's happening so far. Again, the really heavy-handed, in my opinion, foreshadowing. I just wish there was a little bit more nuance, and I've read thrillers that have a lot more nuance, so we shall see. I probably am not going to check in with you again until I finish the book, I would imagine, or DNF it if I end up DNFing it, and then we'll kind of check in from there. But I do know this was very early on in Ruth Ware's career, and I think that's showing a bit. I have only ever read one other book from her. I read The Death of Mrs. Westaway because I am weak for an inheritance plot. I love that trope. So this one has a little bit of the kind of like unreliable female narrator trope, which I know got so overdone, especially at the time that this came out, and I don't really love that. Like, I think it got way disproportionately represented, and like, women don't deserve that, y'all. They're smart. Quit acting like they're dumb as hell. I will check back with you once I finish, and we'll go from there. Bye. I have finished The Woman in Cabin 10, and I'm here to give you my review. But first, let me just show you that we have a little bit of a visitor behind me. So I wanted to join, and I should share that it was his birthday not too long ago. What a precious boy. And we took him to the dog park. There's lots of wonderful dog parks in Seattle, but the best one by far, I think, is Magnuson for off leash. And we took him swimming. He had a great time. And so weirdly that day, there were so many ducks, or like duck-like birds, I'm not sure if they're actually ducks, along the water. Big was very intrigued getting to look at them all. So he had a great birthday. Happy birthday to him. He is 8 years old. I can't believe it. But we'll get back to the book. So The Woman in Cabin 10. Whew, what do I say about this? This was not it. I think there were some issues with this book. I did finish it. I thought about DNFing it at one point, but I was already most of the way through, and it was like, it was fun, but I have some problems with the book. Mainly, I think the blame gets pinned on the editor on this one. I've talked about before on my channel that I find it really frustrating when there are typos or grammatical errors in a book. That is what an editor is getting paid for to catch, and those are the simple catches that you really should be fixing in the book before it gets published. This had two. Oh, he's speaking his head up. He's also upset about the typos. This had two in them. One where it was like a word that had gotten duplicated and hadn't been removed. And then the other one I can't quite remember. And then there was also in the back section a specific thought that the character had on one page, and then literally 2 pages later, the same exact thought. And I was like, okay. In addition to those kind of small errors, I do think this needed some editorial direction in terms of the main character. So I talked a little bit of before, after part 1, that the main character was definitely getting set up as this unreliable female narrator. In this case, she's unreliable because she's just been through a traumatic event, and so her account of things can't be trusted without the traumatic event coloring how she viewed the scream and subsequent splash that happened on the boat. Now, in addition to that, there was the blood, remember, and then things continue to happen that indicate that there is actually something going on. The plot of this is pretty wild. It really reminded me of Lucy Foley's books, whose plots are also really outlandish, and I think you need to suspend your disbelief a lot. I can do that, and I was able to do that for this book, but the editorial errors mixed with the character work of our female lead were just too much for me to surmount in terms of really loving it. So this book was ultimately not a win for me, but again, it was early on in Ruth Ware's career. I do think the editor needs to take some blame for this one, and I've read a book from Ruth Ware later on, and I did enjoy that one more. So let me talk a little bit about the adaptation for this, because while I didn't love the book, I do think this is going to make a pretty interesting adaptation, because we're not going to have to be in the main character's head, or I'm assuming it's not going to have some type of like omniscient narration in the film. I think it will remove some of the frustrating and stereotypical elements of our female lead, and it'll come across much better in the book, because there were things, right, where it's like trying to show that she's intelligent and can be a good journalist, but then she's like completely flustered in every interaction, and it's so bizarre, and I just can't imagine that they're gonna put that in the film. It would be really awkward to watch. I think they're probably going to tone it down a little bit at least. And again, I do think Keira Knightley is a very talented actress, and I think she can play this off well, and believably well, I should say. So yeah, this wasn't totally a hit. I am still really excited for the film adaptation, and I'm going to watch it, and I think I will like the film better than the book. That's my prediction. So that is The Woman in Cabin 10. So I will check back in with you once I've started the last book of this vlog, which is The People We Meet on Vacation, and I will see you all in just a second. All right, y'all, I'm here to give an update on People We Meet on Vacation. I'm gonna give you a quick rundown of the synopsis, and then we're gonna talk about the adaptation, and then I'll give you my initial thoughts. So firstly, we are following Poppy and Henry? No. We are following Poppy and Alex. They are our love interests for this book. And Poppy is a travel journalist, which is so interesting because isn't that what the last book was? Okay, it totally was. That's kind of weird. So she's a travel journalist, and clearly there's been some time in between reading these 2 books. She has kind of an effervescent, outgoing personality. She's adventurous, yada, yada, yada. That's sort of the vibe that we're getting for her. That's the archetype of Poppy. For Alex, he is definitely the shy, kind of gruff. It's very much like a grumpy sunshine type of trope. Is he a teacher? I'm sorry to this man, but I literally cannot remember what he does. Maybe he's a teacher. I'll correct that in future clips if I find out otherwise. They are
best friends who often go on vacation with one another. Hence, people we meet on vacation. So that's the really, really high level plot that's going on. It's a romance. You know what's gonna happen. You know what's gonna happen. So let's talk about the adaptation. The adaptation for this is going to be a film. It is coming out on Netflix. We don't have a release date for it yet, but it's sort of predicted that it'll be coming in the end of 2025. But don't hold your breath because they haven't actually announced when it is going to be released. Now, the casting for this is really intriguing. Playing Poppy is Emily Bader from My Lady Jane fame, which I loved. I think My Lady Jane was such a criminally underrated show. Tragique that it only got one season. So funny and inventive. And then Alex is going to be played by Tom Blythe of Ballad, it's because I live in Seattle. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes? What is the name of that? The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I think that's it. The Suzanne Collins prequel to The Hunger Games. He plays the main character, he plays Snow, and he is going to play Alex. This is such an interesting casting, and I think part of it is just because of what I've seen them in before. It feels like a real departure in some ways, but I do think both of them did phenomenal jobs, so I'm really happy to see that they both got cast in that, and let's hope the chemistry is spot on. So let's get into my initial thoughts, and we'll see how I'm feeling about the adaptation thus far. I am really only in the beginning. I think I'm like 35 pages in. I've read the first 2 chapters. Like most romance novels, the beginning is cringy. I always struggle with this. Like I was saying about The Woman in Cabin 10, these true genre novels, I find the beginnings very cringe, very forced and contrived, and I do struggle with that. I tend to like them the more the book goes on, but I do struggle with the beginnings, and that is no exception here. Whew. Okay, so clearly very tropey. There's this grumpy sunshine setup, but the book starts with a flashback. So we begin with a flashback following Poppy and Alex on a vacation. Where are they? They're somewhere summery. I can't remember. Insert generic island vacay here. And you get to see some of their chemistry. They're best friends. And Alex has recently gone through a breakup. They go on the vacation to help him get over the breakup. And we end with happy memories all around. Now, cut to 2 years later, Poppy and Alex no longer really talk. They send a text on each other's birthdays. That's pretty much it. But you don't know what happened. And I'm assuming that is a mystery that's going to unravel as we get further into the book. But we do know that Poppy has lost her inspiration, her luster, her verve for her travel writing. And honestly, it's kind of annoying because it's definitely giving, I have this privileged dream job where I get to travel and go to all these lovely events and yada yada yada, and I'm still unhappy. And it's just kind of annoying to read. It's like, girl, you have a dream job that so many people would kill for, and you're like whining about it. Like, come on. Other people have it so much worse. But the other thing that bothers me with it is that the dream job is unrealistic, right? Like, this is not what an actual travel journalist life is like. It's not just nonstop vacations and free food and all of that type of stuff. There are elements of that, but there's a lot of other grunt work that goes into travel journalism that is not represented here. So it's like this rose-colored version of a job, and then she's still unhappy with it. Like, girl, get a grip. But that's the start. So she needs to come up with a new pitch, a new vacation that she's going to write about in her magazine, but she can't think of where to go. So she's talking with her friend about this, who is an influencer as well. I'm not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole at this point in time because it's also a really stereotypical description of it. The friend basically says, well, when was the last time you were happy? And kind of use that to gain inspiration for your next trip. And she realizes that the last time she was happy was when she went on a vacation with Alex. So she decides to text him kind of out of the blue, and that's where I have left off. So I'm assuming she's going to convince him to go on a vacation together, and there's going to be some type of reconciliation. We're going to understand why they had a fight in the first place, and then they will end up falling in love. I'm okay that it's feeling predictable. I think romance kind of should have predictable elements in some ways because you're reading it because you want happily ever after, which is guaranteed in a romance book. So I am excited to see where this goes. I did like my last Emily Henry. I'm expecting to at least enjoy this overall, and I do think I'll enjoy it the more that I continue on. So I don't know if I'm going to check back in with you when I finish it, or kind of if something happens. I would imagine it's probably going to be when I finish it. So I will see you all then. Until next time. All right, we are back for the last update of this vlog because I have in fact finished The People We Meet on Vacation. So I have plenty of thoughts about this one, but I will say overall, my thoughts are this is kind of a swing and a miss for me. It is really not to my taste in a number of ways that we're going to get into, but I did finish it. So let's quickly talk about the things that I enjoyed about this novel, and then we'll get into some of the criticisms, which I think I have distilled down into 3 kind of main parts, but we'll see how that feels as I start talking about it. So firstly, I do think overall this is well written in terms of the actual like syntax of the novel. I think Emily Henry is a talented writer, and I definitely saw that in Beach Read, and I saw that in this book as well. So I think she's a gifted writer. The sentences flow really well. It's really readable, and that is definitely a skill. Other thing that I liked about this, which is going to sort of contrast something I'll say later, but you know, 2 things can exist at once. The ending of this book had some elements that I really enjoyed. I think obviously you go into a romance novel knowing that there's going to be a happily ever after. She does a good job in this of trying to be somewhat realistic in the happily ever after. So the main character, Poppy, makes a comment at the end when they're already together saying that yes, they are very happy, but in fact they are extremely busy and they don't get to see each other all of the time because they have really booming careers and independent lives. I thought that was just a nice realistic touch that she didn't have to add, but she did, and I very much appreciated that. Now let's get into the things that I did not like, because this one was strange. I had such high hopes for this Emily Henry, for me in particular. I know that this is her least popular book, at least in my circles on BookTube and people that I follow that talk about books. This tends to be her least popular, but I thought that I would particularly love it because some of the people who don't like this book don't like it because it deals with friends to lovers. I really love a friends to lovers trope. I actually don't like enemies to lovers, which is much more common and popular right now. So I thought this might be a really good fit for me because I like that slow burn, to me, a little bit more realistic and healthy relationship to root for. Oftentimes with enemies to lovers, the main character, at least like in the heterosexual ones, the main male character is kind of an asshole, and it's not to the point of just being enemies, like he's actually a dick, and I don't want the female lead to ever end up with him because I'm like, this guy's like straight up a jackass. You should never want to be with this man. Like, so confusing, and I just can't root for the love story. So friends to lovers tends to subvert that for me. They're already friends, so they already like each other. There's a lot of healthy communication dynamics already in place, and the romance just builds on that. So I tend to like it better. This one did not fall under that niche for me. And that comes to my first point of what I didn't like about this. I really struggled with some of the character arcs in here, particularly from Poppy. I think that's because she's the only POV that we get. We do not get Alex's POV. I think I might have had some issues with his as well if we had, but because we're only getting Poppy's, hers is the one that I really took issue with. And mostly that's because I feel like she makes many decisions that are extremely selfish, and she does not even think or question the impact that it's having on Alex, even though they're best friends, and she should really be thinking about those types of things. Now, with a kid, right, you might say like, oh, they're naive or they're oblivious to how they're impacting the others around them. But when you're an adult, I think it just comes across as ignorance, and that's not a good look in an adult. And I really struggled with that with Poppy and didn't find her character arc redeeming enough to forgive what had come, you know, the 300 pages prior. So that's my first main gripe. Secondly, This really stretched me on the disbelief. I could not suspend my disbelief for this book. Normally I can give at least some. This one I think took it a little bit too far. It comes up in a lot of ways actually. One of the things I just think is so glaringly silly is that Poppy, like consistently throughout the 10 years that she knows Alex, is like, oh, we're best friends and I love him so much and I care for him. And it's so weird how I get turned on all the time when I'm around him. What could that be about? And I'm like, oh my God, like, bitch, clearly you have romantic feelings for him. Why else would you feel all these things? You're clearly in love with him. The denial just did not work. Like, make it make sense, Emily Henry. And then there were other elements, like I referenced previously. So many of the jobs are such stereotypical rose-colored versions of those jobs. Also, there's like a completely unethical and illegal thing that happens with a therapist at the end, which is just bizarre. It's like, girl, did you not even do your research? Like, that would never be able to happen. It's literally illegal. But whew, anyway, clearly it bothered me. There were lots of parts that bothered me, and I thought about DNFing it for a while, but I was already so far through that I just thought I would, finish it up. So that was the second thing that bothered me, is this like really unbelievable convenient plot points and character elements that I just did not like. And thirdly, I really struggled with the structure or the formatting of this novel. It's told in a combination of present day timeline and then almost alternating every other, but not quite, with a trip from a previous summer. So we start with 10 summers ago and lead up to the most recent summer trip where something happened between them that we don't know about. It caused a fracture and they hadn't talked in 2 years after that. So we get these alternating chapters. This really stifled the pacing for me in the current timeline. For the first almost 100 pages, I was getting really frustrated at having to go back to the previous vacations because the current day timeline was getting so stalled out. We were just not moving forward because we kept getting interrupted and having to go back. And it was frustrating. I think it totally messed up the pacing. And I just don't know if that was a smart decision, at least not to my taste, clearly. Near the back half of the novel, it started working out much better because the current day timeline had propelled enough to hold its own, but in the first half of the novel, it hadn't. So those are the three things that really bothered me. Some of them are taste-related things, and I do know there's a small minority where this is their favorite Emily Henry book, and to those people, what I have to say is, who hurt you? Who hurt you that they made you want this to be your favorite Emily Henry? Whew, what's going on there? And this has such good blurbs. This book specifically has really good blurbs by very well-known romance authors, two of which I've read from before. The two that I've read from before are Abby Jimenez, who is also having a moment. She's just as popular as Emily Henry, and Beth O'Leary, who wrote one of my favorite romance novels of all time. And they specifically love People We Meet on Vacation. And the one thing that I can come up with, because if you love this book, there's actually no shade. I'm joking. You're allowed to love this book. Again, it's well written. It's just not to my taste. But I do think this had a couple unique and original ideas in it for a romance book. And I'm wondering if that's why the people who really champion this book like it, is for those little injections that feel very new in romance. But that was definitely not enough to carry it for me. So this one did not work for me overall, but we did it. I'm still really excited for the adaptation. I think the adaptation could smooth out a lot of the things that I personally did not like. For example, obviously with the film, we're not going to be in Poppy's head. So I think we're going to be able to bypass some of her really frustrating inner commentary that is just ignorant in my opinion. So that I think will be a good thing for me. Also, I don't think they're going to be able to include as many flashbacks in a film as are in this book, because the budget alone on having 10 different flashback locations for all these different vacations that are pretty elaborate, I just don't think would be possible for a romance film. So I think they're going to have to cut them out. And my guess is that they're going to cut them out from the beginning of the film. And I think that is definitely the right choice if that's what they go with. So here's to hoping. I'm going to watch the adaptation. Still really excited about the cast. I think the adaptation will change elements of this book that will make it a much better fit for me. And I guess all I can really say is I will let you know at the time that I watch it what I thought in comparison to the book. But yeah, not totally for me. This vlog was super interesting in a couple of ways. So let me lift up the 3 books that we read for this vlog, because this book is by far my favorite book that I've read so far this year. Hands down, it will be in my favorite books of the year, maybe even my favorite book of the year. So I absolutely love this. I would highly recommend this if you are interested in reading it at all. Please pick this up, and definitely pick it up via audio if you like listening to audiobooks, because Elle Fanning just has a fantastic narration of it. So the best book of the year so far. And then we have these 2. These are 2 of my lowest rated books this year so far. So on the complete other end of the spectrum, I can definitely see why people enjoy these. They're just not for me. And this one, I will say, I do blame some stuff on the editor. This had really good bones. I just think it needed a stronger editing hand. And this one, not my particular brand of romance or characters that I like in a romance. So very fascinating journey overall reading these adaptations. I'm really excited for every adaptation, most so for Margot's Got Money Troubles, not just because it was my favorite, but it's the one that I hold out the highest hopes for in terms of my viewing taste as well. And it's the only series in the mix. This one, Woman in Cabin 10, I think is just going to be a really fun time. Plus, I love Keira Knightley, so that will be very exciting. And this one, also excited about the casting, and I think it will improve upon the issues that I had with it. So let me know if you have read any of these books, and if so, what you thought about them. Let me know if you're excited for the adaptations of these. And with that, my friends, thanks for coming on the journey with me, and I'll see you next time.